Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
The Herald, Wednesday the 24th of August 2022. News. Crieff Hydro Chief warns of closures as cost rises hit hard. This article is by Scott Wright. The Chief Executive of Crieff Hydro, the Perthshire-based hotel group, has declared there will be significant closures across the tourism and hospitality industry as it grapples with a barrage of soaring costs. Stephen Leckie issued the warning as new accounts show that the company, which owns Crieff Hydro, Peebles Hydro and the Ballachulish Hotel, returned to profit in the year ended February the 28th. The Crieff Hydro Group made a pre-tax profit of £3.1 million for the period, following a loss of £3.2 million last time, as turnover climbed to £28.6 million from £12 million, despite 2 months being lost to coronavirus restrictions. However, revenue was 20% short of pre-pandemic levels, with Mr. Leckie stating that the results had been greatly supported by relief from business rates and a temporary reduction in value-added tax for the hospitality industry. And he noted the current year was proving to be even tougher for the wider tourism and hospitality industry, which he said was marred in a cost of doing business crisis. The energy bill for the Crieff Hydro family of hotels has rocketed by £1 million to £1.6 million. Its insurance costs have risen by £400,000 to £1.1 million, and it is now paying £1.5 million a year in business rates. The hike in costs has come as surging inflation has rocked consumer confidence, with the cost of living crisis leading hotel guests to spend less on food, drink and activities. Fuel costs are also forcing people to question whether they can afford to travel to holiday destinations such as Crieff, while staff are worried about the cost of driving to work. Mr. Leckie said he speaks to business owners across the industry, from hoteliers to late-night operators, and noted that many are struggling to take their figures on revenue. He told the Herald people have less money to spend. They are spending less on food, less on drink, less on discretionary spend, less on activities. The numbers are okay, but they are not what we want them to be. When I say that, I am not talking about my own business, it is the whole industry. That's on the revenue front. On the profit front, this year is going to be as tough as COVID, as tough as lockdown, because of the costs. We talk about the cost of living crisis. This is a cost of doing business crisis as well. Mr. Leckie, who is chairman of the Scottish Tourism Alliance and president of Scottish Chambers of Commerce, said business rates relief and the lower rate of VAT had saved us millions, noting that underlying trading wasn't good last year, but the level of VAT applied to the industry has returned to 20% from the temporary 12.5%, and business rates are once more being levied in full. The profits made in the year to February the 28th will allow Crieff Hydro to reinvest £3 million into its properties this year, But Mr Leckie said rising costs, allied to pressure on revenue, means its ability to reinvest in future has been severely curtailed. Asked how government could help, Mr Leckie repeated the industry's call for a reduction in VAT, noting the UK had the second highest rate of this tax in Europe. He also highlighted the impact of air passenger duty, which he said was the highest in the world. Mr Leckie said that the number of tourists from overseas was 70% below 2019 figures, in part because of how expensive it is to visit Scotland. Taxes are high and the price of holidays and tours has gone up because of the increased costs faced by operators, he added. We are in a bit of a spin here, Mr Leckie said. We are happy to pay our way so long as we are making money. But if all we are doing is working really hard all year just to pay the extra energy bills, just to pay the increased cost of doing business, just to pay tax, and there is no profit, that means we can't reinvest back into our quality. Referring to Crieff Hydro's current financial year, Mr Leckie said the company will make only a fraction of the profits it made last year because of subdued trading and higher taxation. And he warned increased costs will result in closures across the industry, with many businesses already working to reduce opening times because of higher costs. Asked if he was aware of business owners deciding to close due to the pressures, Mr Leckie said anecdotally they are selling their businesses, are on the market, or they are deciding they can't afford to open this winter time. He added, we will see significant closures. Crieff Hydro Limited employed an average of 736 staff over the period, up from 508 the year before. This article is by Scott Wright. The Herald, Wednesday the 24th of August 2022. News. Scottish Tories warn ministers of risks of rejecting Glasgow Freeport bid. This article is by Tom Gordon. Tory MSPs and councillors have warned their colleagues in Westminster that rejecting Glasgow's Green Freeport bid would represent a lasting economic failure for the country. In a letter to Levelling Up Secretary Greg Clark, the group said it was absolutely critical one of the low-tax enterprise zones was created in Scotland's industrial and trading heartland. The UK and Scottish governments are currently jointly assessing bids from 5 sites around Scotland, only 2 of which will be granted Freeport status later this year. Promoted by Peel Ports and covering Glasgow Airport and the Moss End Railhead in North Lanarkshire, the Glasgow Green Freeport bid is the only one in the west of the country. The others on the shortlist are on the east coast or the Northern Isles. The Firth of Forth Green Freeport plan straddles 3 councils, taking in Grangemouth in Falkirk, Leith in Edinburgh and Rosyth in Fife. The other 3 are the Aberdeen City and Peterhead Green Freeport, the Opportunity in Inverness, and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport and the Orkney Green Freeport. Designed to boost economic growth by offering tax breaks and other incentives to businesses within them, Freeport zones can be 45 kilometres across. The Scottish scheme is being backed by £52 million from the Treasury. In their letter to Mr Clark, which is also going to SNP Deputy First Minister John Swinney, the 7 Tory MSPs and 29 councillors from West and Central Scotland urge both governments to recognise Glasgow as the strongest of the 5 bids in contention. It has the potential to transform our area by attracting investors, fuelling enterprise, increasing exports and creating thousands of high-quality new jobs, they write. Clyde Green Freeport's multimodal bid covers air, sea and rail. It will unlock global trade, promote regeneration and repurpose 600 hectares of vacant and derelict land. Not only will this bring immense benefits to the region, but it will also boost the wider Scottish and UK economy. They then warn ministers of the consequences of not picking Glasgow. We believe that to maximise the huge economic benefits a successful Green Freeport bid would deliver, it is absolutely critical that one of the two designated Scottish locations is based in the West. Failure to create a freeport within Scotland's industrial and trading heartland would represent a missed opportunity and a failure to achieve the radical and long-term benefits that are possible. People in the west of Scotland will be encouraged by the cooperation between ministers in both our governments, UK and Scottish, and we would urge you to reach the logical conclusion of backing the Clyde Green Freeport. The signatories include MSPs Jackson Carlaw, Russell Findlay, Pam Gossel, Jamie Green, Dr Sandesh Gulan, Annie Wells and Megan Gallagher. The SNP initially refused to work with London on freeports, saying they were tarnished by association with smuggling, tax dodging and bad pay and work conditions. But after the UK pushed ahead with 8 freeports in England and 1 in Wales, the Scottish Government relented, provided the Scottish sites were green freeports. Extra safeguards in Scotland include all operators required to adopt fair work practices, including union recognition, the real living wage and no zero-hour contracts. The sites must also contribute to Scotland's pursuit of net zero carbon emissions. However, the SNP's partners in government, the Scottish Greens, remain fiercely opposed to the ports, saying they will hand tax breaks and public money to rich corporations. It is understood a decision on which 2 Scottish sites will get the green light is expected within weeks, with the hope both are operating by next spring. This article is by Tom Gordon.
Recorded from the Herald on the 24th of August 2022. From the sports section, recorded by Amy. Scottish mountain biker Rab Wardle dies in sleep at the age of 37. By the Herald Sport. Scottish mountain biker Rab Wardle has died just days after winning the Scottish MTB XC Championships. Scottish Cycling confirmed on Tuesday evening that Wardle died in his sleep aged 37. It said in a statement that on Twitter, "We are devastated to confirm the news that international mountain biker and former employee Rab Wardle has passed away today. We have very little information at this stage, but we send our love and support to his family, friends, and all those in our community who knew him. We ask that you respect Rab's family's privacy at this sad time." Wardle won the elite men's title at Currow Tree Forest on Sunday, overcoming several punctures to win on the final lap. He appeared on BBC Scotland's The 9 programme on Monday evening to talk about his victory, but died later that night. That article was by the Herald Sport.
From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 24th of August 2022. From the Voices section, Ian McWhirter, "We need furlough-style action now on energy bills for everyone," by columnist Ian McWhirter. "It has to be big, has to be bold and done across the UK very quickly," said the boss of Scottish Power, Keith Anderson, yesterday, calling for an energy price freeze. It's not often that the Scottish Government hosts summits where everyone agrees. Politicians, business, charities and consumer groups, power companies were unanimous yesterday in calling for energy bills to be capped before they double next month. The gas price shock is the result of the war in Ukraine, and, as in any war, the state has to take charge of the cost on behalf of society as a whole. What is required, within weeks, is something similar to the furlough scheme during the pandemic, that met 80% of the cost of lost wages. The government has to underwrite a similar proportion of the extra cost of this winter's bills. This is exactly what Norway has done. Italy and France are following suit. It is imperative that help is given across the earnings range, not just to those in benefits. The only way to halt the wave of strikes that threaten the wider economy this winter is to remove the threat of £5,000 or even £6,000 energy bills. If the price hikes go ahead, 2/3 of Scotland will be plunged into fuel poverty, including many on middle incomes. If the UK government does not act now, there will be mass non-payment campaigns, civil disobedience and potentially a general strike across the public sector. If these strikes cause wages to rise in pursuit of prices, inflation will be baked into the system, and it could take interest rates of up to 7% to unbake it, according to analysts at CITI. That could make millions of mortgages unaffordable. Living standards will anyway be hit by the biggest shock in nearly 50 years if inflation rises to 18% next year as some forecast. Millions who normally regard themselves as comfortably off will be plunged into penury, especially those, like pensioners, who rely on fixed incomes. So there really is no doubt what needs to be done. Scottish Power are hardly socialists, but their solution of containing excess energy costs in a special fund, paid off over the next 2 decades, is in the right ballpark. There is a precedent. The loss-making assets of the banks that went bust in the 2008 crash were quarantined in a special fund underwritten by the Bank of England. If delinquent banks can be bailed out, so can the people. But what about the wealthy? Why pay their bills? UK CEOs, who have seen their average pay rise to £3.4 million recently, will, of course, have to contribute to the circa £40 billion cost of the energy price freeze through the taxation system. First, there should be a surtax on high incomes, just as there was in the Second World War. Secondly, the energy extraction companies, BP, Shell and the like, should pay a higher proportion of their surplus profits in a windfall tax. BP is so cash rich, it is buying back its own shares. Thirdly, the energy supply companies, who are effectively insolvent, will have to accept suppression of profits and remuneration for the duration of the fund, or face nationalisation. Finally, the government could issue green bonds against future earnings from the renewable energy boom that is coming down the tracks. Nicola Sturgeon has rightly said that managing the gas crisis now has to be done at UK level, however damaging that may be to her call for an independence referendum next year. I think we can assume that the referendum will not now happen. The Scottish Government, however, is not entirely powerless. It could raise a surtax here in Scotland. It has the powers to do so. It can also issue green bonds. However, the onus must be on the UK to mobilise the scale of funding necessary to meet the cost of a price freeze. Liz Truss has been telling fairy tales about solving the cost of living crisis with tax cuts. Sheer political necessity will force her to descend to the real world, if only to save her skin at the next general election. She says she believes in capitalism, so perhaps she should listen to private companies like Scottish Power. There is 50 gigawatts of cheap renewable energy available to the UK which, as Mr Anderson says, is a long-term solution to the gas crisis. Ms Truss will also have to inform die-hard climate sceptics in her party that developing green energy is a national priority equal in strategic significance to defence. The transition from fossil fuels must be accelerated. The good news is that the massive Seagreen wind farm off Angus, with its Eiffel Tower-sized wind turbines, has finally started producing energy. But it won't be contributing much until the end of next year, and even then its 1.1 gigawatts is a drop in the bucket. The UK will need 4 Seagreens every year if it is to meet its 2030 target. It took 13 years to develop the first one. Planning will have to be streamlined, especially for onshore wind. Energy behemoths like Total, which is behind Seagreen, need to be pushed harder to develop offshore wind and carbon capture. They may be too big to nationalise, but the government is bigger still. It holds the future revenues of renewable energy in its hands, which gives ministers massive leverage. The bad news is that we are still dependent for the next decade on oil and gas. Ms Sturgeon needs to hold another energy summit to mobilise her existing hydrocarbon resources in the North Sea. We cannot go on importing oil and gas from delinquent regimes in the Middle East and Russia at enormous cost to the environment, not to mention world peace. Even sustainable Norway is drilling for new oil and gas and threatening to curb energy exports to ensure its own security of supply. Oil and gas is a strategic resource, as powerful as any superweapon. Russia has demonstrated this by holding the EU to ransom. Norway understands that this new reality. So should Scotland. And that column was by Ian McWhirter. Our columns are a platform for writers to express their opinions. They do not necessarily represent the views of the Herald.
Herald Scotland recorded on Wednesday 24th of August 2022. Arts and Entertainments, Festival Music, Scottish Chamber Orchestra / Amelia Chef, Usher Hall, Edinburgh, 5 stars, by Keith Bruce. Festival Music, Scottish Chamber Orchestra / Amelia Chef, Usher Hall, Edinburgh, Keith Bruce, 5 stars. Violin Concerto No. 1 by Max Bruch is surely the most played violin concerto in the canon at present, but audiences never tire of hearing it. Nicola Benedetti may well have performed it more often than anything else in her repertoire, but in partnership with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra and its Russian principal conductor Maxim Amelyanishev, she found new things to say on Monday evening. This was always going to be a special occasion, a concert appearance and festival director Fergus Linehan's final programme by the woman who succeeds him in the role in a few weeks, and Benedetti had a statement outfit for it in spangled white jumpsuit that even the most misogynistic London critic would struggle to identify as gym wear. In other ways, understatement was the order of the night, from Louise Goodwin's timpani role and the muted winds that usher in the soloist. This was an account of the concerto very carefully measured. Benedetti's first note in the violin, firm and assertive, but also quiet, and perhaps slightly extended. Although we saw the exuberant side of Amelyanishev later, it was after much of a notably meticulous maxim. The soloist treated her cadenza at the end of the first movement as little more than a bridge to the central adagio, which is the romantic heart of this romantic concerto. Its dynamics beautifully controlled by the conductor and moto as a partnership performance rather than a star vehicle. It was also noticeable that Benedetti did not attack her first entry in the closing movement as she once would have. The Hungarian fireworks of this finale were not as gaudy as we've heard them in the past, and all the better for it. And as crowd pleasers go, the meditation from Massenet's Thais, with the conductor at the piano, could not have been bettered as an encore. Amelyanishev was even more in his element after the interval, directing this large edition of this SCO through his choice of music from Tchaikovsky's ballet The Sleeping Beauty. Harpist Eleanor Hudson and principal cello Philip Hyam were among the leading solo turns in a reading shorn of any Wagnerian pomposity, in which just 20 first and second violins proved ample to communicate the rhythmic complexities of the score. The precision tempi and ensemble coherence created by this most eloquent of conductors made it easy to imagine the dancers the music was composed for, and in true Amelyanishev style, this DVD came with encore extra features after the carefully unfolded Act 2 finale. By Keith Bruce.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 25th of August 2022, from the news section, Emily Maitlis speaks of Tory cronyism at the heart of the BBC in Edinburgh lecture. Report by Emma Sabliak. Journalist Emily Maitlis has called out Tory cronyism at the heart of the BBC as she spoke about her own perceived impartiality while working for the BBC. The former Newsnight presenter said the BBC sought to pacify Number 10 by issuing a swift apology for her monologue about Dominic Cummings after the advisor breached COVID-19 rules. Maitlis was speaking at the annual McTaggart Lecture at the Edinburgh TV Festival to highlight what she described as a normalising of populist ideas by the media. Referencing both former US President Donald Trump and the Brexit debate, Maitlis described her thesis as being both political actors and politics itself have changed, but journalists are yet to catch up. In her lecture, which she called Boiling Frog, Why We Have to Stop Normalising the Absurd, She criticised the BBC's response to the 2020 Newsnight instalment, in which she opened the episode by saying Mr Cummings, then Boris Johnson's chief advisor, had broken the rules with a lockdown trip to Durham, and the country can see that, and it's shocked by the government cannot. The broadcaster received more than 20,000 complaints and ruled Maitlis breached impartiality rules, saying in a statement, "We believe the introduction we broadcast did not meet our standards of due impartiality." Speaking about the report, she said, "It was only the next morning that the wheels fell off. A phone call of complaint was made from Downing Street to the BBC News management. This, for context, is not unusual. It was not unusual in the Blair days, far from it, in the Brown days, in the Cameron days. What I'm saying is it's normal for government spin doctors to vocalise their displeasure to journalists. What was not foreseen was the speed with which the BBC sought to pacify the complainant. Within hours, a very public apology was made, the programme was accused of a failure of impartiality, the recording disappeared from the iPlayer, and there were paparazzi outside my front door." Maitlis said the media shows its impartiality when it reports without fear or favour, and when we are not scared to hold power to account, even when it feels uncomfortable to do so. She added, "When we understand that if we've covered the rule breaking by a Scottish chief medical officer or an English government scientist, then journalistic rigour should be applied to those who make policy within number 10. The one person, ironically, who understood this was Dominic Cummings himself, who texted me that very evening to offer his wry support." So, back to the speed of response. Why had the BBC immediately and publicly sought to confirm the government spokesman's opinion without any kind of due process? It makes no sense for an organisation that is, admirably, famously, rigorous about procedure, unless it was perhaps sending a message of reassurance directly to the government itself. In an apparent reference to Theresa May's former communications director, Sir Robbie Gibb, Maitlis added, "Put this in the context of the BBC board, where another active agent of the Conservative Party, former Downing Street spin doctor and former advisor to BBC rival GB News, now sits, acting as the arbiter of BBC impartiality." She added, "According to the Financial Times, he's attempted to block the appointment of journalists he considers damaging to governmental relations, provoking Labour's deputy leader, among others, to call it Tory cronyism at the heart of the BBC." Maitlis, who joined the BBC in 2001 and presented Newsnight from 2006 until earlier this year, also claimed journalists are now self-censoring to avoid backlash for their work. She recalled feeling conflicted over a 2020 interview she conducted with Hollywood star Robert De Niro, in which he raged about Mr Trump's mishandling of the pandemic. After describing how she tried to balance the actor's claims about Mr Trump, she said, "We finished the pre-recorded interview. Adam Kaminsky is the output editor, and he's a big film buff. But as we were heading up in the lift, I turned to Adam and say, 'We can't possibly put this out. It's too anti-Trump.' Adam looks at me to see if I'm joking, and I'm not. I'm terrified that by putting out the interview as it stands, we will be seen as biased." De Niro is a world-famous actor and a New Yorker, and has chosen our programme, Newsnight, as a place to land his thoughts quite carefully. So why do I feel unable to let him say it without trying to find an equally world-famous actor who that same night is miraculously going to tell us the opposite? And wouldn't I be tumbling into both sidism, false equivalence, even if we had? Maitlis apologised to those who thought she would speak about her headline-grabbing interview with the Duke of York, adding, "That will have to wait till next time." During the November 2019 interview, Andrew was grilled over his relationship with billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, and the interview went on to win the Scoop of the Year award at the Royal Television Society Awards in 2020, with Maitlis also named Network Presenter of the Year. In February, she and John Sopel announced they were leaving the BBC to join Global, where they host a podcast, The News Agents, and a radio show on LBC. A BBC spokesperson said, "The BBC places the highest value on due impartiality and accuracy, and we apply these principles to our reporting on all issues. As we have made clear previously in relation to Newsnight, we did not take action as a result of any pressure from Number 10 or government, and to suggest otherwise is wrong." The BBC found the programme breached its editorial standards, and that decision still stands. A Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport spokesman said, Sir Robbie Gibb is an experienced broadcaster who spent many years working in the media sector, including as the head of BBC Westminster and the deputy editor of Newsnight. He was appointed to the BBC board following a fair and open competition after demonstrating his commitment to the independence, mission and public purposes of the BBC, and the real state political activity should not be a bar to appointment. The BBC's Director General has acknowledged the corporation needs to improve the impartiality of its news output, and Sir Robbie's vast experience will make a valuable contribution to that aim. The MacTaggart Lecture has formed the centrepiece of the Edinburgh TV Festival since 1976 and has been delivered by a host of notable figures, including actress and writer Michaela Cole, broadcaster Jon Snow, and fellow former Newsnight host Jeremy Paxman. And that article is by Emma Slabiak.
Recorded from the Herald on the 25th of August 2022, from the sports section, recorded by Amy. Nathan Patterson given epic Everton praise as Seamus Coleman backs ex-Rangers kid to star in Premier League for decade, by Darren Johnson. Everton stalwart Seamus Coleman has backed Scotland international Nathan Patterson to light up the English Premier League for at least the next decade. The former Rangers fullback has played every minute in all three of Everton's league matches so far this season, before lining up alongside Coleman for just over an hour in Tuesday's Carabao Cup win at Scott Brown's Fleetwood Town. Patterson has had to be patient in his bid to make an impact at Goodison Park after joining in a £16 million move from Ibrox in January. His only first-team outing for the Toffees last term came in a 45-minute run-out in March's FA Cup win over Boreham Wood, a month before his season was cut short due to an ankle problem that required surgery. By experience, Republic of Ireland right-back Coleman believes the 20-year-old has all the attributes to enjoy a long and successful career in English's elite division. Speaking to Everton TV, Coleman said, "First and foremost, I look at the character of the person Nathan is. He's a great lad, he's really humble and very hard-working. On top of that, you can see the quality he has. He is still young, but he shows great attributes, bursting forward and playing 1-2s. He looks as fit as a fiddle. With the likes of myself, Tarky, James Terewski, Connor, Cody, Jordan Pickford, and there's a lot of other experienced lads in the squad too. It's our job to help him along the way and make sure he becomes a Premier League player for the next 10 or 12 years, because he's got that ability." That article was by Darren Johnson.
The Herald Scotland, Thursday, 25th of August, 2022. Voices. Rebecca McQuillan. The politics of American right is getting nastier. Is it catching on here? Brace yourself. Joe Biden has not long occupied the White House, but we're already hurtling towards the 2024 US presidential election, with the midterms due to take place in just a few weeks. The conduct and outcome of those elections matter to all of us, and the omens are unsettling. It's not so much that American democracy is decaying. It's under full-scale bombardment from a right-wing Republican Party recast in the image of Donald Trump. Having been ejected by voters from the White House in 2016, the 76-year-old has in effect been camped outside with his battering rams ever since, determined to get back in, it seems, by whatever means necessary. Donald Trump has been astonishingly successful in getting Republican voters to believe what Biden has called the big lie, that the Democrats stole the 2020 election through massive election fraud. Attempts by exasperated judges, officials and Democrats to highlight the lack of any evidence whatsoever to support the claim, in spite of repeated exhaustive public investigations, have had next to no impact. Such is the modern-day Republican movement. Belief in the power of objective truth seems hopelessly quaint in the face of this juggernaut of anger. Trump has total command of the grand old party. In key battleground states, Republican voters have been choosing candidates for November to stand for the roles of Governor, Attorney General and Secretary of State, offices which have authority in elections. Republicans are opting again and again for election deniers. In Arizona, all three Republican candidates fall into that category. Democrats believe these candidates will be easier to beat because of their extreme views, but nothing is certain. The threat these individuals pose to democracy is blatant, and all of a piece with Mr. Trump's claims to be the victim of political persecution and his supporters' demands to defund the FBI. And it's getting nastier all the time. The language key Trump supporters use of their perceived opponents strays beyond the normal cut and thrust into something more sinister. Immigrants are now routinely termed invaders. One true zealot, Arizona Republican nominee for governor Carrie Lake, calls journalists corrupt and un-American, in spite of having spent most of her career as a TV news anchor. And her Twitter account called another Republican candidate sickening for not agreeing that the 2020 election was stolen. Republicans who won't toe the Trump line face loathing. One chilling example comes from would-be Republican senatorial nominee in Missouri, Eric Greitens. "Today we're going rhino hunting," he says in a June campaign advert. Rhino standing for Republican in name only. In the ad, Greitens totes a shotgun and is shown with a group of men in military gear bursting into a home. The ad has been met with a wave of condemnation, including from Missouri's largest police union, which said it sent the dangerous message that it was acceptable to kill those who have differing political beliefs. It's been banned by Facebook, but Greitens seems unfazed. Earlier this month, Donald Trump said he endorsed Eric in the Missouri Republican primary. There are two Erics in the contest, but the former president's willingness to be perceived as a possible Greitens supporter speaks volumes. Trump critics, like Liz Cheney, meanwhile, are not making it through the Republican primaries. All this matters enormously on this side of the pond, most obviously because big wins for the Make America Great Again, MAGA ticket in November, make a Trump victory in 2024 more likely, with all the implications that has for climate change, NATO, and the threat posed by Russia. But it also matters because the tenor of American politics is catching. Cartoonish as Trump's puppets may seem when set against the more muted palette of British politics, there is nothing funny about their intentions, and we can be sure politicians here will be influenced by them. We're seeing it already. This week, the Democrats have chosen a candidate to go up against keenly watched Republican Ron DeSantis in Florida. DeSantis, a diehard of the right, sets MAGA hearts aflutter and is tipped to run for the 2024 presidential nomination. Anti-mask and anti-abortion, he loves to bash the woke. A brief perusal of his latest tweets finds him attacking ESG, environmental, social and governance criteria followed by businesses, and woke ideology, and promoting new measures to prevent ballot harvesting. The echoes of all this in our own political debate are unmissable. Election fraud is vanishingly rare in the UK, but the Conservatives stand accused of overstating the fraud risk in order to pass laws insisting on certain types of voter identification, a move which, surely coincidental, looks set to benefit their party. The Tory leadership campaign has seen both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak referencing their anti-woke credentials, making sure to use the word itself in case anyone misses the dog whistle. Truss's attack on woke civil service culture is pure populism, repackaging public servants as establishment elites, casting Truss as the true champion of the people. Meanwhile, she has announced a moratorium on green levies, a target of hard-right Brexit types like Steve Baker. She appears to be staking out her position in the culture wars. We also hear from both Tory candidates a slavish adherence to the fiction that Brexit has been a roaring success, in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Just as calling out the big lie will result in swift and public excommunication from Mar-a-Lago, denying the glory of Brexit is forbidden in the Tory party. Liz Truss deserves some credit. She is no clone of Trump, and our democracy would be safer in her hands than America's in his. But just as Trump has changed the Republicans for the foreseeable future, so the politics of the Johnson era, itself influenced by the US debate, looks to have become a fixture here. The worry must be that this style of politics, which ignores unhelpful evidence and stokes division, is a gateway drug for the hard stuff Donald Trump peddles. Half the Republican voters want Trump to run in 2024. Perhaps Liz Cheney will run for president and hive off just enough Republican voters to make it hard for him to win. We'll see, but whatever happens, we have a serious problem of our own to contend with.
Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 25th of August 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Edinburgh Festival Pick of the Best Final Shows by Philip McHugh. Susie McCabe, Born Believer, Assembly George Square, 7:45pm until Sunday. This woman should be considered a national treasure. She was the fastest selling act 3 years in a row at the Glasgow International Comedy Festival, and she's back in Edinburgh with a brand new show. Susie, now in her 40s, has decided to shed her cynicism and become a brand new positive Susie. Brackets, optimistic at best, positive is pushing it, close brackets. I laughed the entire hour of her show, which was jam-packed with stories and punchlines about her age, her Catholic guilt, her love of football and her sexuality. It's no surprising that tickets are hard to come by because the show is witty, gallus and completely Glaswegian. Blunderland, Underbelly Circus Hub, 9:55pm until Saturday. The international cabaret and circus circuit's subversive breakout hit has taken Edinburgh by storm this fringe, with a healthy dose of what we all need right now: outrageous nightlife naughtiness, club kid antics and art house weirdness. Born in the underground queer nightlife scene of New York, this show has titillated packed crowds around the world with its uniquely whimsical and ridiculous performance combinations. This show is not for the faint of heart, but that is part of what makes it so amazing. A staggering amount of talent, a wild ride with artists doing what they do best. I screamed in awe, shock and sometimes horror several times during the show, but Australian circus rarely disappoints, and Blunderland is a show we should all see before the fringe ends. Edinburgh Military Tattoo, Edinburgh Castle, 9pm until Saturday. The Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo is back with a bang, welcoming back fans after a 3-year hiatus. The 2022 show features performers from Canada, Germany and Australia, as well as homegrown talent from the United Kingdom. The Highland Divas original composition and vocals open the show, which runs until August 27 and ends with a bang as fireworks light up the skyline over the 3,000-year-old fortress. It's outstanding and a brilliantly produced event that provides a unique experience for all. Rob Madge, My Son's a Queer, brackets, but what can you do, close brackets, Underbelly George Square, 4:15pm until Monday. When Rob was 12, they attempted a full-fledged Disney parade in their living room for their grandmother. While Rob dressed up as Mary Poppins, Ariel, Mickey Mouse and Belle, their father served as stage manager and sound technician. This is the joyous, chaotic, autobiographical story of actor, writer and social media sensation Rob Madge, as they set out to recreate that parade with a large Edinburgh Fringe audience. By Philip McHugh. Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 25th of August 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Paperback review, The Voids by Ryan O'Connor. By Alistair Mabbitt. The Voids, Ryan O'Connor, Scribe, £8.99. When all the lists are totted up at the end of the year, it would be a little disappointing if Ryan O'Connor's remarkable debut hadn't scored a respectably high placing amongst the best Scottish novels of 2022. Already O'Connor has found a voice, one which is convincingly authentic, and yet mercurial enough to chart both the transcendent highs and soul-destroying lows of alcoholism, shifting smoothly between comical substance-induced blunders, deep introspection, and crushing emotional blows. Its unnamed 30-year-old narrator lives on the 14th floor of a condemned Glasgow high-rise. Since the announcement of its demolition, nearly all of the occupants have moved out. Almost alone in this rapidly emptying mausoleum for the dispossessed, he breaks into the voids, the flats that have been vacated and will never be occupied again, and takes items left behind by the departed residents, rearranging them in other empty flats like art installations. And just as he tries to define some meaning in the random objects others have abandoned, this failed journalist and novelist is compelled to do the same with his own life. I'd be leaving home in a roundabout way since I was 12 years old. Alcohol became my primary escape route quite early on, but it wasn't the only one, and not the first, he confides. His discovery of the transformative power of drink more or less coincided with an interest in mystical literature, particularly Castaneda, and the Glasgow we see through his eyes is as much a psychic and symbolic landscape as a geographical one. A grim backdrop of windowless bunker-like pubs and decaying tower blocks becomes an expressionistic cityscape charged with meaning, where every addict like himself is playing parts to disguise their true selves. Not for nothing is our narrator nameless. His abortive attempts to visit his dying father, a former nightclub singer, are steps in a reluctant search for himself. Whenever he thinks he's hit bottom, he finds he can sink lower still, and his chaotic life unfolds in a series of picaresque vignettes, frequently punctuated by blackouts. This results in some great, skillfully crafted set pieces, from the hilarious hairdresser's promo event which gets him sacked from a local paper, and a memorable scene in a Chinese restaurant where he and his wasted companions end up with a table groaning with food they'd forgotten they'd ordered, to the powerfully moving memory of the coach journey in which his father abandoned them, and the moment one of the high-rise's last residents soft shoes off a parapet to his death. Rejected by his parents, convinced he will never experience happiness and weighed down by the kind of self-loathing that comes from being told by an ex-girlfriend, "You are the darkness." He sees a lonely majesty in the concrete tower that resonates with a lifelong sadness of his own, but there's a little misdirection going on here. More often than not, his gaze is actually fixed above the high-rise, appraising the ever-changing heavens, where the sun might be rising like a glaucomic eye, or sinking slowly into a pool of blood. And despite his unstable and short-lived relationships, he rarely fails to find brief moments of comfort amidst the chaos, with other damaged people who, like him, exist in the margins. Knowing the comparisons, brackets such as Ballard, Burroughs, Welsh and Gray, close brackets, it would invite, O'Connor set himself a high bar with this book, but he has the skills to clear it satisfyingly, tying up his protagonist's emotional arc as he faces his demons and seems finally within touching distance of the peace he's craved all his life. By Alistair Mabbitt.
The Herald, Friday the 26th of August 2022. News. Edinburgh bin strike. Disaster relief charity, RRT, deploys to curb mounting waste problem. This article is by Jodie Harrison. A charity which specialises in supporting disaster relief operations has begun work to help clear Edinburgh streets of mounting piles of rubbish. Volunteers from Rapid Relief Team, RRT, are working with a contractor to install large skip bins at key locations around the city to prevent further build-up of trash on the streets. Overflowing bins have become a feature of the city in recent days, following a walkout by waste workers, which began on August the 18th. The strike is due to last until August the 30th. RRT, a global charity which provides food and supplies to workers battling catastrophes such as floods, fires and earthquakes, said that volunteers will be on the ground from Friday as part of an ongoing operation which could last up to a week. They will collect fresh rubbish in the bins and dispose of it, but will not lift the piles which have already accumulated for safety reasons. However, anyone wishing to deposit leftover rubbish in the bins, capable of holding around 39 tonnes of trash, will not be prevented from doing so. Graham Neal, who is organising the effort on the ground, said, "We're looking to provide around 30 large wheelie bins in the central areas of Edinburgh to alleviate the issue of the waste which is built up. The bins are full and overflowing. We will be deploying the bins in conjunction with a waste management company who will dispose of it, but we won't be picking up the rubbish ourselves. If people want to do that and put it in the bins, they can do that. We want to avoid the situation getting any worse. That's key for us. The Rapid Relief Team will be deploying 30 1,200 litre wheeled skip bins in 5 locations across the historic centre of Edinburgh. The skips will be placed at Princess Street, High Street, oblique Royal Mile, Grassmarket, Waverley Bridge and the Mound from today to help clear the backlog of rubbish. A spokesperson for RRT said, "We are working with a local contractor with permissions from Edinburgh City Council, and once filled, the bins will be collected and the waste disposed of and the bins replaced. We see this as an ongoing operation until a satisfactory pay resolution is reached." RRT volunteers continue to support communities that are faced with challenges, and we see this as a continuation of our work with Police Scotland in the Edinburgh area, supporting the vulnerable in our communities. Edinburgh City Council has been approached for comment. This article is by Jodie Harrison. The Herald, Friday the 26th of August 2022. News. Martin Lewis, Don't Pay Energy Bills campaign is growing. This article is by Jodie Harrison. Consumer champion Martin Lewis has said a movement to refuse to pay energy bills is growing, as he called on the next Prime Minister to spend billions to solve the crisis. He told ITV's Good Morning Britain, "I think the Don't Pay movement is growing. There are dangers to being in the Don't Pay movement as an individual. All I can say is what would happen in a typical case scenario where an individual refused to pay. What is far more difficult to predict is if there is a massive movement not to pay. I think what is safest for me to say is while I think it should have come earlier, my hope is on September the 5th, there will be a new Prime Minister. We've heard from both the candidates, but they seem to indicate they understand the scale of the crisis. What we need to hear is concrete solutions. And let's be absolutely plain, there are many methods that you can put in place to alleviate and mitigate some of the terrible damage that the rising energy prices are causing. Could the Don't Pay campaign have an impact? Mr. Lewis added, "So I'm going to be agnostic over the solution, but it will involve spending substantial amounts, billions of pounds of government money, to stop some of the most vulnerable and many middle income earners from having some terrible choices to make this winter. We have to hope that will be in place. And I suspect if it isn't in place, then people coming from the Don't Pay movement are going to become a louder voice in this country. The Don't Pay campaign has said it will call a non-payment strike once 1 million people have pledged to join their campaign. It claims to be a grassroots organisation which is seeking to build a network across the UK. Its website states, "Millions of us won't be able to afford our energy bills this winter. We can't let that happen. Don't Pay exists to bring us all together, build our leverage and fight back. We're building our strength by mobilising for a non-payment strike. This means getting together everyone who wants to challenge this rigged system. It's for everyone you know who can't or won't pay. We'll link you up with others in your local area and we'll build this together, street by street, estate by estate, and city by city. When 1 million people pledge to say they'll stop paying their energy bills, we'll call the strike. We'll force the government, market regulator Ofgem, and energy companies to come to the table and negotiate with us collectively." This article is by Jodie Harrison.
From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 26th of August 2022, from the sports section. How much money will Hearts make from Europa Conference League group stages? Revealed by Darren Johnson. Hearts have banked an automatic £2.5 million windfall after dropping into the Europa League Conference group stages, following an agonising loss to FC Zurich. To put that into context how significant that is for the Geordie side, their turnover in their most recent financial results was £7.7 million, a figure affected by COVID. Performance-related bonuses are also up for grabs once the first of 6 group fixtures gets underway on September the 8th. Teams will be awarded £422,000 for each victory and £140,000 for a draw. The group winners will also collect £930,000, with the runners-up netting £464,000. All 32 teams will also earn a share of the £20 million coefficient-based pot and £20 television market pool. And all the prize money available is even before Hearts start selling tickets and hospitality for 3 home games at their 20,000 capacity stadium. And that article was by Darren Johnson. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 26th of August 2022, from the sports section, Karim Benzema and Carlo Ancelotti react to Celtic Champions League draw as pair insists there are no favourites, by Aidan Smith. Carlo Ancelotti and Karim Benzema are expecting a tough test when they face off against Celtic in the Champions League. Real Madrid have been paired with the Scottish champions in Group F of the competition, alongside German outfit RB Leipzig and Ukrainian side Shakhtar Donetsk. Yes, Real Madrid is the biggest name, but there will be no small opponents on the other side of the pitch, Benzema told Real Madrid TV. There are no favourites. This group is more complicated than others, but we'll concentrate on our job and try to win all our games. Real boss Carlo Ancelotti echoed his striker's comments, and he looked upon the last year's short defeat to FC Sheriff as a warning. The draw is always the same way. We need to value it and keep our focus, said the UEFA Men's Coach of the Year. The easiest game that we had last season, in theory, was against FC Sheriff, Tiraspol, but we lost it at the Bernabeu. So we must prepare well for all these games and try to win them as usual. And that article was by Aidan Smith.
Herald Scotland recorded on Monday 29th of August 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Tyke. Scots Word of the Week by Dictionaries of the Scots Language. The definition of this word for a dog pulls no punches in the Dictionaries of the Scots Language, (DSL, close brackets). A dog generally with contemptuous force, a hulking, uncouth, ill-bred dog, a cur, occasionally applied to other ill-favoured or ill-conditioned animals, e.g. a sheep. Although reading some of the examples, this definition does not always seem to apply. In Twa Dogs, 1786, Burns wrote, "He was a gash and faithful tyke, as ever lap a sheuch, (ditch, close brackets, or dyke). According to DSL, in this instance, gash means sagacious, shrewd, smart, witty. There is, however, another well-known Burns line, (from Tam O'Shanter, close brackets), that more closely fits the above definition. There sat old Nick in shape a beast, a towsy, (of hair tangled, unkempt, close brackets, tyke, black, grim and large, to gie them music was his charge." Whilst in some cases the meaning has been transferred to persons, usually young and mischievous, it is still used to describe dogs. The Herald of August 2006 recounts the following. "My friend had entrusted her little hairy Jack Russell pup to me while she went into a supermarket in Byres Road. Rather than stand outside like a numpty, I crossed the road to look in the window of a posh food shop with the unbelievably cute little tyke in tow. Sometimes owners even call their dogs tyke. From the Southern Reporter of May 2016, Tyke, a crossbreed corgi, was so fat he could only take a couple of steps before becoming breathless and slumping to the ground. The dog was taken into care." Scots Word of the Week is written by Pauline Cairns-Spital. Visit DSL online at https://dsl.ac.uk. By Dictionaries of the Scots Language.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 29th of August 2022, from the sports section. Monday kick-off. Sunderland fans furious at Alex Neil, and no wonder, by James Morgan. Sunderland fan anger towards Neil understandable. There isn't a lot that makes sense about Alex Neil's move to Stoke City right now. As the dust was settling over Friday's surprise announcement that the 41-year-old Scot was leaving Sunderland, fans were asking quite how and why Neil's reign had come to an end in such a swift fashion. It was only back in May that the former Hamilton, Norwich and Preston manager had overseen Sunderland's return to the Championship via the League One playoffs and, indeed, this column had praised the work he had done in giving the club its identity back. Neil, himself, sounded as if he was in the job for the long haul, as he spoke about changing the culture at a club which he felt had delusions of grandeur, and he had been impressed by how his players and staff had responded to his observations. Fast forward a couple of months and the Black Cats have made an impressive start to the new season and currently sit 5th in the division, so you can understand fan anger towards Neil, who recently hinted at a lack of ambition from Everton's Nathan Broadhead, who spent last season on loan at Sunderland, for opting to choose Wigan Athletic over a return to the Stadium of Light. "We need players who will come here and back themselves to contribute to what we're doing," said Neil a fortnight ago, before the irony of his words came back to haunt him. That takes a certain type of mentality to do that at this club, because of the pressure and scrutiny that comes with it. The rumour is that Neil was disappointed with the club's transfer activity over the course of the summer, so why Stoke City, who posted losses of £56 million and who avoided a points deduction last season as a result of financial fair play issues, made such appeal to him is a question only he can answer. Sometimes the Lord taketh away before the Lord giveth back again. Hearts' Europa League exits at the hands of FC Zurich on Thursday night might have felt like a disaster at the time for all concerned, but the silver lining for the club was always the knowledge that, even in defeat, Conference League action would give them a taste of European group competition for the first time in the club's history. Friday's draw helped to provide the Edinburgh outfit with the best of both worlds. While Robbie Nielsen must have had one eye on the Europa League draw, and would likely have been cursing under his breath when Zurich were placed in a glitzy group alongside Arsenal, PSV Eindhoven and Bodo Glimt, there would have been a quiet satisfaction that the opponents in his side did find themselves paired with Istanbul Başakşehir, Fiorentina and Latvian Minnows RFS, provided both a dash of glamour and a decent chance of progression to the knockout rounds. Norrie worth a bet at Flushing Meadows. The US Open has really been more aptly named in a year when the identity of the winner of the men's tournament is incredibly difficult to predict. The Big Four is a thing of the past, with Roger Federer missing as age starts to catch up with him. Andy Murray is no longer the same player since his hip operation, while Novak Djokovic's COVID vaccine status ensures he won't be in attendance at the Flushing Meadows when the US Open starts today. That leaves Rafa Nadal as the sole contender from the quartet that has dominated men's tennis for the best part of a decade. It would be foolish to rule out the Spaniard, of course. He has won 2 of the last 5 US Open titles and has been victorious in 2, the Australian and the French, out of 3 slams this year. However, the US Open has always thrown up a greater diversity of winners. There have been 7 different ones in the last decade. This season, Cam Norrie reached the final in Mexico and the semi-finals at both Cincinnati and Wimbledon. Last season, he showed he can live with the big boys by winning in Indian Wells. At 45-1 outright, the adopted Scot can give punters a sweat to the quarter-finals at least. Lennon deserves his success at Ammonia. Neil Lennon took plenty of stick for his role in Celtic's disastrous attempt to win a 10th successive league title in the 2021 season, a campaign that was ultimately undone by events out with his control. Numerous players, most notably Odsonne Edouard, wanted to leave the club 2 summers ago and yet were persuaded to stay. One player went AWOL, and a number of others caught COVID, leading to fixture delays that left Celtic playing catch-up on Rangers, and then matters spiralled out of control with an ill-judged trip to Dubai. On top of everything else, poor recruitment by previous directors of football had left Celtic's squad in a dilapidated state. This is not some attempt at revisionism, however. It was clear that Lennon lost the dressing room when he called out want-away players on the eve of the new season, and tactically appeared all over the place at times. But Lennon was not the only man to blame. That's why it's so pleasing to see his new club, Omonia Nicosia, create a shock last week in Europe when defeating Ghent, and then were subsequently rewarded with a draw in the group containing Manchester United. Boffelli helping Scotland's cause. Scottish rugby fans already know about the dangers contained in the laser-accurate boots of Argentina fly-half Emmanuel Boffelli. The 27-year-old, who scored 165 points in 18 games for Edinburgh last season, was the same man who skewered Scotland's hopes of a summer tour victory in Argentina with a kick to the first test beyond Scotland, and then following a series of test deciders with a try that came after the 80th minute in a thrilling victory that served the impact that new coach Michael Cheika had made in the Puma squad. Since then, Argentina have not looked back. They demolished Australia 48-17 in San Juan a fortnight ago, then, on Saturday, recorded an historic 25-18 win over the All Blacks in Christchurch to leave themselves top of the 2022 Rugby Championship standings at the halfway mark. Boffelli was 6 from 6 on penalties and tacked on a conversion to produce a faultless performance with the boot, a world-class display which left him top of the points rankings for the tournament. The good news for Scotland: they have risen to 7th in the Rugby World Rankings off the back of Boffelli and Argentina's exploits without having to play a match. 4. The number of goals scored by Bristol City attacker Tommy Conway in 6 games this season. The 20-year-old, who spent last season on loan at Bath City, is believed to be eligible to play for Scotland. And that was this week's Monday Kickoff by James Mordling. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 29th of August 2022, from the sports section, golf. Rory McIlroy makes FedEx Cup history with stunning success. Rory McIlroy remarkably overturned a 6-shot deficit in the final round of the Tour Championship to become the first player to win the FedEx Cup 3 times. McIlroy carded a closing 66 at East Lake to finish 21 under par, a shot ahead of Sungjae Im and Scotty Scheffler, who had been an odds-on favourite to secure his 5th win of the season and the $18 million £15.3 million first prize. However, Scheffler struggled to a 73 and McIlroy took full advantage to claim an extraordinary victory, having started the week 6 shots behind the world number 1 under the handicap scoring system and making a triple bogey in his first hole. McIlroy has now earned $43 million £36.6 million for his 3 FedEx Cup victories. Tiger Woods, 2007-2009, is the only other player to have won it more than once. Playing together in the final group, McIlroy and Scheffler both bogeyed the first, and while Scheffler also dropped shots in the 4th and 6th, McIlroy birdied the 3rd and made 3 more in succession from the 5th for a share of the lead. Scheffler responded immediately with a birdie in the 8th, and although McIlroy got back in level terms on the 12th, the Northern Irishman bogeyed the 14th after missing the green with his approach. McIlroy was not about to throw the towel in though, and holed from 30 feet for birdie in the 15th and saved par in the next after flying his second shot over the green from a fairway bunker. The former world number 1's chip was travelling at speed when it clattered into the pin and, after Scheffler made bogey from a greenside bunker, McIlroy holed from 7 feet to take the lead for the first time. A poor bunker shot in the par 5 18th cost Scheffler the chance to force a playoff, and the Masters champion had to scramble for par to share the second place with Im, who matched McIlroy's closing 66. What a week, what a day, McIlroy said at the prize presentation. Firstly, I want to say I feel like Scotty deserves at least half of this trophy. He has had an unbelievable season. I feel sort of bad that I pipped him at the post. He's a hell of a competitor. He's an even better guy. It was an honour and a privilege to battle with him today, and I'm sure we'll have many more. I told him we're 1-1 in Georgia this year. You get the Masters. I got this. I didn't really give myself much of a chance teeing off today. I thought 6 behind was going to be really tough to make up, but my good play and Scotty's not so great play meant it was a ball game going into the back 9. As for what it meant to win in a season which has emerged as one of the PGA Tour's biggest advocates in its battle with LIV Golf, McIlroy added, "It means an awful lot. I believe in the game of golf. I believe this tour in particular. I believe in the players in this tour. It's the greatest place in the world to play golf, bar none, and I've played all over the world. This is an incredibly proud moment for me, but it should also be an incredibly proud moment for the PGA Tour. They have had some hard times this year, but we are getting through it, and that was the spectacle out there today. 2 of the best players in the world going head to head for the biggest prize on the PGA Tour, and I hope everyone at home enjoyed that." McIlroy admitted his win would help soften the blow of failing to win the 150th Open Championship at St Andrews, where he shared the lead after 54 holes, but finished 3rd behind Cameron Smith, who's expected to join LIV Golf imminently. "St Andrews was really hard for me," McIlroy said. "It was a tough one to get over. This softens the blow a little bit. It doesn't make it that much easier to get over, but it's good to end the season on a high note like this. Everyone on tour has had to deal with a lot. Even the guys that went to LIV have had to deal with a lot. It's just been very tumultuous sort of era in our game." And that article was unattributed.
Hello, this is your reader Jackie on Monday the 29th of August 2022, reading the Herald. News revealed Scottish Power's obscene £7 billion dividends to Spanish owners as energy bills soar. This article is by Martin Williams. Scottish Power, which has been pushing for a taxpayer-backed £100 billion fund to help energy firms freeze energy bills, has handed over nearly £7 billion in dividends to its foreign owners since being taken over, it can be revealed. The payout bonanza to its Spanish owners, Iberdrola, over its 14 years of control of the Glasgow-based company, has been revealed as its high-profile chief executive, Keith Anderson, has seen his pay soar by £200,000 to £1.35 million in a year. 6 years ago, Scottish Power Limited's highest paid director was getting almost half that at £687,000. Scottish Power's dividend payments to Iberdrola has amounted to nearly £1 billion in the past 2 years alone, as customers face energy bills soaring by 3.5 times in a year. The amounts paid out over nearly 15 years is £2 billion more than Mr Anderson said Iberdrola was putting into a major global investment plan in the UK over 5 years when he was appointed chief executive in February 2018. Campaigners have described the amounts that have been paid out as obscene, as Mr Anderson tabled the energy prices safety net plan to Scottish and UK ministers, underwritten by taxpayers' funds, and would have to be paid back through bills. Armed Forces Minister James Heappey dismissed eye-watering loan scheme proposals was not the best way to get through a winter of price hikes, saying that taxpayers' money should be targeted to the people who need it most. Simon Francis, coordinator of the End Fuel Poverty Coalition, said the profits, dividends and bonuses enjoyed by the firm are in stark contrast to the misery felt by millions of people in Scotland and beyond as energy prices soar. On Friday, Ofgem raised the annual energy price cap bill for the average UK household by an unprecedented 80% from October, from £1,971 to £3,549, hitting 1.5 million Scots households with the biggest increase yet. That means the typical UK home will pay nearly £300 a month. Prepayment meter customers, often among the most vulnerable customers, will pay an extra £59. Since the Ofgem price cap was brought in January 2019 to protect consumers from soaring bills, nearly £1.25 billion in dividends has been paid by Scottish Power to Iberdrola. The introduction of the price cap for customers was an attempt by Ofgem to put an end to suppliers exploiting loyal customers and allow consumers to pay a fairer price for their energy. It was seen as a safety net for customers who do not regularly switch and who are on standard or default tariffs, typically a supplier's most costly charges. Dividend levels have soared from £300 million in the first full year of the Iberdrola takeover in 2018 to £860.4 million in 2020, the third highest payout in 15 years. The highest dividends were in 2013, when £917 million was paid out, and 2014, when it was £900 million. In 2021, the dividend was £45 million. Scottish Power says that £500 million of the 2020 dividend was an exceptional payment following the £702 million deal to sell a number of its generation projects to UK power company Drax. Under the deal agreed, Drax bought sites including the Cruachan pumped storage hydro station, run-of river hydro locations at Galloway and Lanark, and a biomass from waste facility at Daldowie. The portfolio also includes 4 gas turbine sites. Mr Anderson presented his plan as he attended a special summit by the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon on Tuesday to discuss what can be done to mitigate the impact of soaring energy bills. The Scottish Government said the summit, involving energy companies and advice organisations, reached a consensus that the energy price rises should be scrapped so that a plan is put in place to fund a bills freeze. The proposal, which had the backing of fellow Big Six energy supplier EDF, involved setting up a fund that would be made up of the difference between what people pay now and how much it actually costs to supply homes with gas and electricity to help people in the here and now. He said the scheme would allow government to buy time over the next 2 years and speed up investment in cheap green energy. Mr Anderson has indicated the fund could be paid off by the rest of the customers who can afford their bills over a 10 to 20 year period, or the government could partially fund it. Once bills had returned to more affordable levels, the price cap would be replaced with a social tariff, ensuring the most vulnerable in society are paying less. Mr Anderson said action was needed as predictions for future price cap rises were off the charts. US Bank City predicted that the energy bills price cap would be raised to £4,567 in January and then £5,816 in April, compared with the current level of £1,971 a year. Mr Francis said the group was nervous about Scottish Power's plan. It seems like a government underwritten blank cheque to carry on business as usual. Instead, we would have hoped that the energy bills crisis is a wake-up call that Britain's energy system is broken and in need of fundamental reform, he said. In addition to the reform of the energy market, we need to look at long-term solutions to fuel poverty. This means additional UK government funding to drive better energy efficiency of homes and support the switch to cheap renewables, rather than look at bailouts. He added there have been calls to scrap the energy price cap entirely. In February, Keith Anderson blamed it for dozens of corporate insolvencies in the sector. The price cap may have its many flaws, but it does at least protect consumers by limiting the profits suppliers can make on our bills to 1.9%. It doesn't stop the producers, which may be linked to the suppliers, from making excess profits, but it does help somewhat. Remove it without some other form of protection and we're left to the whims of profiteering of the suppliers as we were pre-2018. What many of our members support is a beefed up price cap and a social tariff to help the households most in need. Financial reports made to Ofgem, which include domestic electricity and gas supply as well as business, show that Scottish Power took £477.7 million in 2020 from energy generation and supply, an annual rise of 87% to £223 million. It had accumulated earnings of £1.53 billion over 5 years, having seen profits more than double over 5 years from £205.7 million in 2016. One of the organisers of a series of Power to the People protests at Scottish Power headquarters in Glasgow and Ofgem's offices in the city, calling for action to tackle astronomical rises in household bills, said the dividends and pay rises were obscene and said public utilities should be nationalised. Those are extraordinary numbers, he said. Of course, this £100 billion bailout suggestion helps energy firms. It is self-interest. The taxpayer is being asked to bail out companies out that have been the cause of the problem. The numbers are unsustainable. Nationalisation is in the interests of the people, as it would stabilise pricing and be for the benefit of the people and not profitability and not for shareholders. Labour says it's planned to ease the cost of living crisis with a 6-month freeze on energy bills at the current £1,971 price cap would cost £29 billion. Funded in part by expanding a windfall tax on oil and gas profits, it was estimated that it would save the average household £1,000. But the price cap rise was widely expected to go up an average of around £1,600. Findings from economists at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS, think tank, suggested the total cost of the plans could be even higher, at roughly £8 billion more than Labour's projected price tag. Setting out the costings for its plan at the time it was announced, Labour said it would close a loophole in the levy on the profits of the energy companies announced in May and backdate the start to January, which together with rising global prices would bring in £8 billion. The party said £14 billion would come from other measures, such as dropping the £400 energy rebate and abandoning pledges made by the Tory leadership contenders. And by keeping inflation down, it said it would reduce the government's debt interest payments by another £7 billion. When Mr Anderson was appointed Chief Executive of Scottish Power in February 2018, he told of the Iberdrola investment plan and added, "We will be delivering this investment in renewables, networks and customer service at a time when the political and regulatory environment in the UK is as challenging as it has ever been. In the role of CEO, I will be working hard to ensure that all of our business areas can continue to deliver for our customers, while our major investments help to develop a smarter and cleaner energy system for the UK. Analysts, Cornwall Insight, have revised their forecast upwards for January's energy price cap to an eye-watering £5,386 a year, or £450 a month. It has urged ministers to review the price cap and to consider ways to protect the most vulnerable, such as social tariffs. A Scottish Power spokesperson said, "We invest more every year on green energy and new grid infrastructure than we make in profit." This article is by Martin Williams.
Only Children Face the Worst Stigma, Even Though We're the Best, by Katrina Stewart. I'll tell you what's an odd phenomenon. Being constantly asked if your childhood was lonely, barren, and has left you an antisocial misfit living a life of regret. This, if you are not in the club, is the worst part of being an only child. No one ever says, "An only child? That must have been great." They do the face. The face is sort of sympathetic, unwittingly probing feature arrangement. The kind of face you would use to tell your elderly aunt her cat's run away when you know it's actually been run over by an SUV. You saw it, it was squished flat, but you want to carefully and empathetically shield her from the fact while also trying to fathom whether she knows you're lying. Usually, the face is deployed by people who are trying to decide how many children to have, and they want you to confirm their biases and thus help go ahead with the decision they've already made but can't yet quite face. People always frame it as trying to do the best thing by their child, but let's face it, Almost no one chooses to have children for the sake of the child. The other main deployment of the face is when people are peeved at their own siblings and want you to confirm that, hey, their brother or sister is of course a nightmare, but it could have been worse. You could have been me. All birth orders have their associated stereotypes. The youngest child probably fares worse. Spoiled, irresponsible, manipulative, slightly neglected. Fun-loving though, so there's something. The oldest child is confident, has the highest IQ, and is conscientious, a natural leader. Middle children are peacemakers and gregarious with it. There is nothing like the stigma of being an only child. Nothing to recommend us. Spoiled, selfish loners, unable to share, outsiders. Stunted social development. Or precocious due to all that adult company, but not in a fruitful or entertaining way. Their weird formative years see them grow up to be rascals. I love sharing, have a wide social circle, and am extremely compliant. I have a friend who will do you physical injury if you try to sample her dinner in a restaurant. She's the eldest of 3. This stuff is hokum. Imagine the only children of the world pummeling around going, "Wow, I met your sister, that must have been a trial," or "So, your brother," and just leaving it hanging. In part, this is another way of nipping at women for their reproductive choices. The ladies should be fulfilling their biological destiny and procreating, not fannying about with careers. But as women have forged ahead in the workplace, the number of only child families has risen. Women don't want to miss out on work, they start trying for families later, and so on. Society still views this as a little bit weird, and so the progeny of such weird women must be tainted by association, right? Good news, everyone. Only children are super weird, but so is everyone else. We are all meaningless specks with a finite time on Earth, and some of us are trying to make more of it than others. I've been asked this question with frequency recently because I'm at that age where friends are having babies, and so it becomes relevant. Concerns about climate change and the cost of living are going to make questions and decisions about family size increasingly pressing. Let me be the voice of reassurance. Being an only child is just fine. Some of my very closest friends are also only children because we seek each other out and we bond fast. Only children make loyal friends because they are not complacent. No one has given them a social leg up. They have to form their own families. Make no mistake, I have sisters. We're just not blood related. The only children I know, and people who aren't as close to their siblings, are the ones who get stuck in with volunteering and providing support systems for other folk. Did I ever want siblings? I went through a phase of it, certainly. I never wanted a brother, but I did think a sister might hold some special magic. In the end, it's an entirely fruitless thing to pine about because there's absolutely nothing you can do to change it. If I'd had a sibling, we might not have liked each other. They might have made life hell. Humans are unpredictable, and when you're creating new ones, you're taking a gamble. The chance is there'll be a lifelong support system to one another, but there's little guarantee. There is, though, one sure truth about parenting. For a long time, no matter what you've done, your child will think you've done it wrong. At least with an only child, there's only one to disdain you. Then we grow up and realise our parents made decisions with love, and we're stuck with these. The only kids, they're really all right. This article was by Katrina Stewart.
And that was this week's The Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.